Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica, another episode of the Unported playlist where we take a look at some of my favorite unported arcade games of all time. And today we're looking at Slipstream, released in 1995 by Capcom. And this is a really fun Formula One style arcade racing game with a really strange history. And I will talk about the history a little bit now and a little bit at the end of the video. But before we get too far involved, if you could do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined, we got a Patreon link down there as well if you want to support the channel. But if you didn't notice at the beginning, the language is either in Portuguese or in Spanish. And the weird thing about Slipstream is that this only came out in Latin America. It was not released in Japan, it was not released in North America. And supposedly, if you believe the internet rumors, less than 150 of these arcade PCBs were ever made and sent down to Latin America. So you're not even going to be able to buy this. Maybe it'll come up in a couple of years, it might be $5,000, but we're talking unicorn status rare for an arcade board. But what you don't really realize is that there were a lot of Latin American exclusive games. Now I've shown Heat of 1198 for the Konami M2 on my channel. It's one of the 3DO M2 arcade games. That released in Japan as the World Soccer Championship, and it released in Latin America as Heat of 1198. It never came out in North America. It was in English, but as far as I can tell, it was a Latin American exclusive where soccer would be a bigger market. Now Latin America is also a big Formula One market, so it's not surprising that Capcom would release Slipstream just down there. What the really interesting thing is that this came out in 1995 on the Sega System 32 hardware, when most games were fully 3D. You had things like Ridge Racer coming out and all the other 3D arcade racing games. So this is using really old technology, so this may have been something like a budget release for Latin America. But outside of the history of how the game came to be, talking about just the gameplay mechanics in general, this is an awesome Formula One arcade racing game with the mechanic of having to draft behind your opponent to get into the slipstream and be able to go faster than them. The controls are outstanding. The graphical scaling looks perfect. It's got everything you want in an arcade game, except you never would have seen this unless you lived in Latin America in the 90s. And I do have a lot of people on the channel that are native Spanish speakers that are from Central and Latin America countries, even South America. So if you've ever seen a cabinet for this, I would love to know, because I've never actually talked to anyone who saw one back in the day. And clearly it was a relatively developed game because it has sponsorships. You're going to see that Mobile One banner go by. So either Capcom handled the licensing for sponsorships with major companies, or maybe they just stole them and didn't tell them because they were only sending it to Latin America. Who knows? But you can definitely tell a lot of time and dedication was put into making this game, which is really interesting that it didn't get too much of distribution. You'll see there's Capcom and Shell billboards as well. It feels like a fully developed release that just maybe at the last minute they decided to only send into markets that were doing better with 2D games. But if you love arcade racing games, if you love the Sega System 32 or sprite scaling games, there's a ton of fun to be had with this one. The driving mechanics feel flawless for using an arcade stick. I'm using my Xbox One controller and everything feels really nice. If you make a mistake and spin out like I just did, that's on you. The game's not fighting you. You really just need to manage your cornering, your speed, and you need to be able to draft to get those boosts, because in later levels, boosting is going to be hugely important. And you'll see that little Foster's logo there in Australian beer. They sell it in North America. I see cans for it all the time. But maybe that was big in Latin America. Or maybe this was also intended to go to Australia, another big gaming market, and just never made it down there. Really, there's just a lot of questions as exactly what Capcom's overall intentions were for this game. But it's great that we got the ROM dump, because if that figure of 150 arcade PCBs total is true, getting something like this dumped was amazing, because it's not like there's 10,000 out there and you just need one person willing to take theirs apart and dump it. If there's 150, it's a really rare instance that these rare arcade boards do have good dumps on them. And you'll see there, I just took a little bit too much speed into that corner and I slid out into the tires, and that's on me. This is a really challenging game, but it's really fun to play because as you get better at it, as you learn the courses, you start enjoying it more and more. And the hook is you have to finish third or better to be able to go on to the next circuit. And you're going to see here, even with my turbo at the very end, I'm going to have a little issue in the corner. I hit, and I can't get up to third place. So what I'm going to have to do is repeat this track again until I can get to third to move on. And as you get into later levels, it gets quite hard. What I'll let you do is watch a little bit of the gameplay without me talking, because the soundtrack and sound effects are great. And I'll be back in about a minute, and we'll talk a little bit more about the whole story of Slipstream. Be right back. And now you'll see here as the sky starts to darken, we're going to start getting a little bit of rain coming down. And I love that the game has different weather effects. You're not always going to be racing in perfect conditions. And you even get a little warning that there is going to be a more slippery track. And this is when the game gets extremely difficult in a really fun way, because you need to manage your speed a lot more. You'll see I got a slipstream there into the corner, and that actually ended up screwing me up. So sometimes you don't actually want to get that turbo boost. Just like any racing game, if there's a turbo involved, getting one into a corner can actually make it worse for you than if you're just bringing in normal speed. And my car is all across the road right now, and it just becomes harder to handle. But as far as the game's concerned, the racing mechanics are amazing. I love the soundtrack, I love the sprite scaling, and I love the story behind this game, because I love all arcade games, even the bad ones, but something that barely even came out and has a really interesting historical standpoint to it is really something I love talking about. And if for some strange reason you've ever seen a cabinet for this, please leave me a comment below, because I would love to hear about it. And if for some strange reason you actually see a board for sale and it's not expensive, please buy it. I mean, I'll buy it off you if you find one for cheap, or you can just keep it for your own collection. But this is really unicorn status arcade hardware right here. But luckily in MAME, it emulates perfectly fine, and you have to love that, because there would really be no other way to play this game, and that's why emulation is so amazing. It preserves things, not just the common things, not just the things that you can go out and spend $1,000 on today and buy a cabinet for. It preserves the rarities and oddities that you would never otherwise have a chance to play. But short of that, thanks so much for watching. If you have any comments or questions, leave them down below. And do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. It definitely helps us out. You'll see we lost this race. We will be back next Sunday with an episode of the Unported playlist. But you can see here that it says, this game is for use only in the Federative Republic of Brazil. So this was not just Latin American, Central or South American. This was Brazilian specific. And how often do you have a game that is specific just to the country of Brazil? I've never seen it. But thanks so much for watching, guys. Bye-bye.